begin. We're going to go back to 8A4, just because we're in the middle of something. So we're going to go back to 8A4, Gufa, on the bottom of Ches Amud Aleph. You see that? Okay, so let's just go back to that because we really stopped in the middle of a discussion. So Gufa. So we're going back to something we mentioned earlier. Amarav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amarav. Mavoi shenifret bimlo lechatzer. If you have a mavoi, the wall in a mavoi that goes between the mavoi and the chatzer, right? So you have the mavoi is where the chatzeros open up into, and the chatzer wall breaks. Okay. Now keep in mind we're talking about a chatzer which is larger than the mavoi. So you have a chatzer that is this large, and then a mavoi that's this large, and the wall between them breaks. So if you're standing in the chatzer, you kind of have walls surrounding you, right? We spoke about this yesterday. But from the mavoi side, you have nothing surrounding you because the wall is completely gone. Okay. V'nifritza chatzer connecto, and then there's a hole opening on the other side of the chatzer that allows you to theoretically go straight from the mavoi into Rosh Hashanah. You could just cut directly through the chatzer and go from one to the other. Chatzer muteras, the chatzer, nonetheless, carrying in the chatzer is permitted because the chatzer is surrounded by walls on all sides. Umavoi asar, and carrying in the mavoi is prohibited. Okay? So, now the Gemara is going to question not the halacha, but why we actually need this to be taught over here. So we're on 8A4, the last paragraph. Amrle Rabba bar Ula Rabibi bar Abaya. Rabbi lo Mishnah Seni Hizo. My teacher, isn't this already taught in the Mishnah? Right? Again, this is just a review from yesterday. Chatzer ketana shnifetz l'gdola. If you have a small chatzer that was completely open up into a larger chatzer, Gedola muteres, the larger chatzer is permitted. Why? Because the larger chatzer, again, it has walls on both. It goes like this, right? And basically has walls on both sides. And there's small chatzer, large chatzer. The small chatzer wall completely breaks down, right? And therefore, from the small chatzer, it doesn't have a back wall. The large chatzer has side walls. Granted, there's a hole in the middle, but that's just an opening, right? So the bigger chatzer, Gemara says, Gedola muteres, you're allowed to carry in the large one, Uktana asura, and the small one you cannot carry in. Why? Mneshu pischa shal gedola, because we just see it as an opening, as an entranceway. So the Gemara is questioning, why do we need these two cases? Why do we need both cases you have a larger space opening up into a smaller space, the wall between them breaks, one of them is a chatzer to a chatzer, one of them is a mavoi to a chatzer. In both cases, the larger one is permitted, you're allowed to carry there because we see the opening just as an opening, and just like a doorway, and not an actual broken down wall. And in the smaller one, the whole wall is missing, and therefore we say you can't carry in it. So why do you need both cases? And the Gemara is asking, Rav, who taught the first halacha between a mavoi chatzer case, it's already a Mishnah. A Mishnah precedes Rav, and therefore, why would Rav, the Amora, quasi-Amora, he's like the first of the Amoram, why would he come along and teach us this case if it's already a Mishnah? We already have the same teaching from Mishnah. So the Gemara says no. Amrle, Rabbi Bar Abaya answers, Ime Hasam, if you would just have the Mishnah alone, you would think that it's talking about, look at the last picture on 8A4, right? It's just two chatzeros that are open, and it's just a chatzer to a chatzer, and you would think we're talking about a case, right? There are two courtyards, and you would say when is it that the larger one, you're allowed to walk in the larger one, where the public are not traveling through it, okay? So in this case, it's hard to see in the back of the second chatzer, but it's not necessarily open. They actually have it open. But the truth is, it could be even closed in this case. I mean, in other words, you have the small one opening up into the larger one, and the back wall of the small one is closed, okay? And therefore, the public is not cutting through it to go from one side of the public domain to the other side of the public domain. But in our case, in the case of Rav, where you have mavoi opens to the public domain, chatzer behind it, and a wall and opens up to Rosh Hashanah behind it, so you could cut through from the mavoi through the chatzer from one side of Rosh Hashanah to other Rosh Hashanah. Ema afilu chatzer nami. You may say that you may have thought that even the chatzer would be prohibited to carry, since you could walk through this space and go from one public domain to another public domain. Kamash Milan, Rav's going to teach you that no, still you're allowed to carry in the chatzer because we see both sides as, even though there's openings on both sides, we see them just as doorways and not as an actual opening, and nothing's missing over there. It's just doorways on both sides. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Says the Gemara. That's what we're up to. This notion that a chatzer that is open to the public domain, we already learned somewhere else that even when a chatzer is open to the public domain on both sides, but we treat it as Rosh Hashanah. Why? It says, it was taught in a brisa. If you have a chatzer which you can enter on one side, right? Let's say you have a courtyard that has a doorway on one side to the Rosh Hashanah and a doorway on the other side to the Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah l'tumah, we treat it as a public domain in regards to tumah. Okay, what that means, we're not going to get into right now into too much detail, but there's a basic concept that when there is a suffix, when there is a doubt as to whether something is tameh, if it's in the private domain, we treat it in one way. If it's in the public domain, we treat it in another way. Okay, so this is a discussion which we're not going to probably visit maybe in this Masechta, but based on the source of how we learn a suffix, a doubt about tumah, and there's a distinction made between private and public. Public in this context means people walk through it. It doesn't have to mean halachic public domain, but it just means people walk through it. So regarding tumah, regarding impurity, since people could walk through the chatzar, it's not a full-fledged private domain in the sense that it's completely enclosed, but rather people are able to go from one side of the public domain to the other side of the public domain through this chatzar. So for tumah, for impurity, we treat it as a public domain. That's not really our focus. Next line, or Rishus Yachal Shabbos, but we treat it like a private domain for Shabbos. So we see explicitly, in other words, you just tried telling me that Rav's novelty was that even though this chatzar was open on one side to a mavoy and then a Rishus Rabim and Rishus Rabim on the other side, and therefore we're going to treat it as, we nonetheless treat it as a private domain, and you said that's the novelty of what Rav is teaching us. What do you mean? It's already taught in a brisa. You have a chatzar which has openings on both sides. We treat it like Rishus Yachid for the laws of Shabbos. So don't tell. So we're still stuck with what is Rav coming to teach me? There's still nothing novel. And again, the Mishnayos and Brisos are the earlier generation. Rav is Namora. When they come along and say something, they're presumably adding something that wasn't said, either said or said explicitly in a Mishnah or a Brisa. So we're back to the question: what is Rav coming to teach us? If we already know that a chatzar that's open on both sides is considered nonetheless considered a private domain. So Rav, who taught us this halacha, where the chatzar opens up into a mavoi, and there's openings on both sides, and the novelty is what? That it's a private domain? We know that. Right? So Gemara still has coming to answer. So Gemara says, Ime hasam, if you would just have the brisa alone, have a mina hanimi zesh lo keneged zeh, you would say that when is it true that a chatzar is considered a private domain? When the openings are not parallel to one another. Right? Because you have an opening, let's say you have a chatzar that's open to the public domain on both sides, but the opening is on one side over here, and then the opening is on this side over here. They're not parallel, right? Then maybe only over there do we say it's still a private domain because there's no easy, just cut through, complete straight cut through, because maybe if there's a complete cut through, we would no longer treat it like a private domain, right? So if it's aval zeh keneged zeh, we're now on ches beis, but if the openings were parallel one to another, directly opposite one another, amalo, maybe from the brisa you would not know that we would treat this as maybe then it would lose its status as a private domain. So that's where Rav is coming to teach me. Rav is coming to teach me that even though the openings are parallel one to another, again, Rav's case was mavoy, chatzar, and Rishus Rabim, mavoy, chatzar, Rishus Rabim, right? And there, maybe, so we asked, what's Rav teaching us? What's the novelty of Rav? The novelty is that even though there's openings on both sides of the chatzar, and they're directly opposite each other, you could carry within the chatzar because it's just considered open doors, and we still consider it as if the whole thing is closed off. Okay? That's the novelty. Okay, the Gemara still has a question though. Ulu Rabba, Damar Zeh keneged zeh aser. This only works if you hold that when doorways are parallel one another in a chatzar, then it's still considered a private domain. But what about Rabba? Rabba told us that when the doorways of a chatzar are open opposite each other, you cannot carry there. So Hadar Rabba my mukilo. So now we're back to the question: what is Rav's case? You don't until now the way we just answered the question was saying, Rav was coming to teach me that even when the doorways are opposite each other, you're allowed to carry in that chatzar because it's still considered enclosed. But we do have one Amora. We have Rabba, who explicitly says that when the doorways are opposite each other, you cannot carry there. So now we're back to the question, according to that opinion, what is the novelty of Rav's teaching? So says the Gemara. So and if you want to tell me we're talking about a case where the doorways are not opposite each other, tarti lamali. Then we're back to our other question of why do we need two cases? In other words, if you want to tell me that Rav's case is talking about a case where the chatzar, where the mavoy and the chatzar, the entrance, the holes, the openings are not opposite each other, right? One is over here and one is over there. They're not directly parallel. Okay, if you want to say that's Rav's case, then we're back to the question, what about the Brisa? The Brisa also had a case where there's a chatzar that had two doorways, and there we said you're allowed to carry in it. And we have to say, according to Rav, that they're not opposite each other. So now we have two cases of not opposite each other. Again, what is Rav coming to teach us? The Gemara says, Ime hasam havimini hani mililizrok avalataltal emalo kemash malan. Okay, so what does this mean? I'm just going to loosely translate it because the terms are a little bit deceiving. But what the Gemara is saying is that had I just had the Brisa, again, what did the Brisa tell me? The Brisa said, when I have a chatzar right? When I have a chatzar, a courtyard, at the end of Ches Amud Aleph, we quoted the Brisa to question what the novelty of Rav was. We said there's a chatzar, there's a courtyard, which has entrances and exits. You can enter on one side from public domain and exit on the other side into another public domain. And we said it's called private domain for Shabbos. Now, what does that mean when we say it's private domain for Shabbos? Does that mean, I could have thought that what that meant is that there's liability on Shabbos. Meaning, if let's say I have like a ball, and I take that ball from the public domain, and I throw it into the private domain, so I'd say, it's a private domain for Shabbos, meaning, what would the halacha be? You're chayav, right? I just took something from a public domain, and I threw it into a private domain, I'd be chayav. But when it says, so maybe that's what it meant, Rishus Yachid, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'd be allowed to carry within it. Right? In other words, there's two levels, right? In other words, when I say something is a private domain on Shabbos, am I saying that it's a full-fledged private domain, I'd be allowed to carry in it? Like in my house, it's a private domain. I'm allowed to go around and carry stuff in my house. Private domain. But sometimes in Shabbos, we'd say, it's a private domain for liability, but not for permissibility. It's liability in the sense if I throw a ball into it, I'm going to have to bring a carbon, right? But it doesn't mean that the rabbis are now permitting me to go allowed and carry. Maybe we'll say, whoa. It looks too much like a public domain because of all those doorways, and therefore we're not going to allow you to carry in it because as a restriction, just to be safe, right? So when the Brisa said that a chutzner that has openings on both sides is considered a private domain, maybe all it was saying was that it's a private domain for liability, but to go ahead and allow you to carry in it, maybe not. And to that, Rav comes along and says, that even if when you have openings on both sides, you're allowed to carry in it. Mutter, right? That's the word he uses, mutter. Mutter means I'm allowed to carry in it. It's permitted to do something. That's what Rav is coming to teach me. And now we've worked out what the novelty of what Rav is according to both opinions. Yes?
So it's been established that there are two different kinds of private Shabbos thing already, or this is when they established that?
So we're saying
liability or permissibility.
It's the first time in Eruvin that we're making that distinction.
In Eruvin, okay.
Yeah.
Shabbos today?
Correct. We missed you. I'm just kidding. But yes, what's it called? But yeah, in Shabbos we found cases where we're going to be strict in both directions. We're going to say, we're going to treat it for liability, meaning because technically it's a private domain, but because we're concerned it's too similar to a public domain, we're not going to have certain allowances. Yeah, okay. But yes, this is the first time we're seeing it over here. Itzmar. Okay. Mavoy asoy kin nadal. Okay, a mavoy which is made like a centipede. Yes, a centipede. What that means is it has a line across, and then it has, imagine a very primitive picture of a centipede. Okay, imagine a 4-year-old was drawing a picture of a centipede. What they would do is make a line, and then and basically make a bunch of legs sticking out. That would be a centipede. That's the mavoy you're looking at. And if you want, you can look at a picture of it on 8b1. But basically, it's one line across. And then you have, coming from that back line, you have one line going down, and then another line going down, and those are the small mavoys coming out of the big mavoy. Okay? So says Abaye, Amar Abaye, Osa Tzuras HaPesach Legadol, you make a Tzuras HaPesach at the front, at the main entrance, okay, when the big mavoy, meaning the body of the centipede, not the legs, the body of the centipede opens up into Rishus Harabim, right? Then the back leg opens up into Rishus Harabim, a small leg, and then another leg, those open to Rishus Harabim on the other side, right? Okay? So the big opening, the body of the centipede, there, Rabbi says you make a Tzuras HaPesach. Again, a Tzuras HaPesach is a door frame, okay? The Hanach Kulu Mishri V'Lechi V'Kora, and all the other ones, the ones that are coming out of the quote-unquote body of the centipede, you put a Lechi or Kora at the edge. Exactly like the picture says on 8b. You see the Tzuras HaPesach all the way at the left. You see that? And then you have the lechi at the edge of each mavoi as they enter into Rishus Harabim. Amar le Rava says to Abaye, come on, whose opinion you're going like over here? Kishmuel de Amar Taraso, Kishmuel de Amar Taraso Kasasum. If you want to say like Shmuel, then how does he treat a bent mavoi? We saw this earlier. He treats a bent mavoi as if it's closed off. Remember, we had this discussion. When you have a mavoi which is like an L, do you see the whole thing as continuous, or do you say no? Since if you draw a direct line from the Rishus Harabim, when you enter and it hits a wall, you treat it as closed off. If you treat it as closed off like Shmuel does, you don't need a door frame at the edge. This is the classic closed off mavoi. Right, a mavoi which is like a cul-de-sac, and there all you need is a korah or a lechi, just a line, a stick on one side or a stick above. That's all you need. So why do you have a Tzuras HaPesach? So can't be like Shmuel, okay? Lamli Tzuras HaPesach. According to Shmuel, you don't need. Why do you need a Tzuras HaPesach? Ve'od hahahui mavoi akum dahavim narda ve'chashulu l'derav. And we saw earlier, a few days ago, that there was a bent mavoi in Naharda, and we saw how everyone was concerned for Rav's opinion to treat it as an open mavoi. Okay, so therefore, the Gemara is questioning, why do you have the Tzuras HaPesach? A Tzuras HaPesach is a Shmuel halacha, where you would have a Tzuras HaPesach at the edge of an open Rosh Hashanah, but according to Shmuel, it's not considered open, and according to Rav, even if you consider open, you would not do it this way. So Elam or Rava, so the Gemara says, no, we made a mistake. You make a Tzuras HaPesach, okay, for all of them, where they open to the larger mavoi, the idach gisa mishru belechi v'kora, and the other ones, and the other side, you put a lechi or a kora. Okay, and this is how Rav deals with a bent mavoi. And so basically, in other words, like this, the Gemara is questioning: you put a tzuras pesach at the top, very nice. What are you doing with all the centipede's legs? What are you doing with the centipede's legs? They're also opening, right? Think about the centipede's leg. Okay, you walk through the centipede's leg. This is so bizarre. Okay, you walk from the Shus Rabbim, from the centipede's leg, and then you go to the right or to the left, and then it ultimately is open. So how are you blocking off those sides? That's what the Gemara's question is over here. According to Rav, who says we treat this as wide open, all you did is put a tzuras pesach on one side, but you needed to put a tzuras pesach at each of these mavois because each of these legs is really an open mavoi because one side is open and the other side is open, right? That's the Gemara's question. Where it says you're right, you put a tzuras pesach at the edge of each leg. Okay, so now the picture on the top of 8b2 is the way it looks because now this fits like Rav because Rav says each one of these mavois is considered open. So good. Now I put a tzuras pesach at the end of each one. Okay, fine, done. That's how the centipede thing is centipede mavoi is fixed. Okay, now the Gemara says further. Rav Kahana bar Tachlifa mishmeid Rav Kahana bar Manyume. Rav Kahana, the son of Tachlifa, says the name of Rav Kahana bar Manyume. Mishmeid Rav Kahana bar Malkio. Mishmeid Rav Kahana Rabbi de Rav. In the name of Kahana bar Malkio, or the name of Rav Kahana, the teacher of Rav. Yes, there are a lot of Kahanas over here. We're going to come back to that. But Amri La, and there are those who say Rav Kahana bar Malkio, Hain Rav Kahana Rabbi de Rav. That Rav Kahana bar Malkio is the same as Rav Kahana, the teacher of Rav. Okay, bottom line is, a lot of Kahanas taught the following: Mavoi should tzidu et echad aruch, v'tzidu echad katzer, pachos me'arba. Okay, so if let's say you have a mavoi where the two walls at the edge of the mavoi don't match up. One goes out further than the other, right? One wall of the mavoi comes out. So if you're looking, I'm the mavoi wall over here. One wall is coming out further. One wall is coming out shorter. Right? So they're not flush with one another. So what do you do? So pachos barba amos, if the difference in length between the longer side and the shorter side is less than 4 amos, maniach es a korah balachson, then you place the korah diagonally from the edge of one going to the other, right? You place it diagonal like this, right? Edge of one to the other. So arba amos, if it is more than 4 amos, eina maniach es a korah ela keneged a katzer. If it's larger than the gap is more than 4 amos, then you place the korah opposite. Like these are the two walls. You'll place the korah on the shorter wall, just going straight. And you don't make you don't make it as a diagonal. You just make it going straight from the shorter wall to the middle of the longer wall. You see it? Yeah, you understand? Fine. Says the Gemara. Rava disagrees. Rava Amar echad zeh ve'echad zeh eina maniach es a korah ela keneged a katzer. You only place the korah opposite the short side. You never place it on an angle. Okay, fine. So you have one opinion says that when there's a gap of 4 amos, you're allowed to place it on an angle, and the other one says you do not. What is the machlokas about? What are they arguing about? So says Rava, ve'ema taima didi. I'll explain my reason. Ve'ema taima didu, and I'll explain the reason of those who argue with me, meaning the Rav Kahanas. Ema taima didi. I will tell you my reason. Korah taima mai. What's the reason behind a korah? What's the function of a korah? So here, remember, we saw 2 opinions before. One opinion said that the function of a korah was to remind you, to serve as a reminder. The other opinion said that the function of a korah is, the other one who said the function of a korah is to form an imaginary wall, like a virtual wall, right? So Rava says, my reason is, Mishum Heker, the reason I say you can't put the korah on a diagonal is because the function of a korah is a reminder. Uvalachson lahave heker. If I place the korah on a diagonal, then there's not going to be a reminder. What does he mean by that? What he means is like this: if I'm standing at the edge of a space, and edge of a mavoi, and there is and on top of me, I don't really have a korah, because like if I'm at the larger side, I basically am at the edge of the korah, I'm at the edge of the mavoi, and there's not really a korah on top of me. Granted, if I start paying attention, I can see that it's sitting there on an angle. But if I'm just looking like directly above me, okay, the Gemara is normally assuming that we're not like being so cognizant of my surroundings. If I'm just standing at the edge of the mavoi, and all I see is maybe a little bit of stick if I'm on the narrow side, or I see a complete opening if I'm on the larger side, and therefore I don't really have something reminding me. And therefore, if I go to another mavoi, which doesn't, and I know everyone carries the mavoi, right? I grew up and everyone was carrying this mavoi, so I don't know that I really need a korah. right? And therefore, if I go to another mavoi where there isn't a korah, I'll say, well, I don't know, you're allowed to carry a mavois. You'll say, what do you mean? Your one had a stick. What stick? I didn't remember seeing a stick because you weren't paying attention. If you have a stick like this, then I look up and I see a stick above me. But if I have a stick like this, depends where I'm standing, I may not see the stick. So Rava says, I'm not necessarily going to be cognizant of the korah, and therefore, since I hold the purpose of a korah is reminders, when it's on a diagonal, I don't necessarily see it above me, okay? And therefore, I might go to another mavoi and mess up, okay? That's why I hold on an angle does not work. Why do the Rav Kahanas say it's okay? Because Kor Mishumai, they hold what is the function of a Korah? Mishum Mechitza. If the function is a partition, if the function is a partition, then who cares if it's straight? Who cares if it's on an angle? We just see an imaginary wall come down, and therefore it's okay. Okay. Fine, that's the rationale behind machlokas. Says Rav Kahana, since we just learned a teaching from a whole bunch of kahanas, so therefore, Ema Ba Milsa, I'm also going to tell you something about a mavoi, because my name is Kahana. I don't know, very strange introduction, okay? But he got your attention, okay? Fine. Hada amras maniacha kor balachson, that we said you place a korah on a diagonal. Lo amran el shen malachsono yoser mi eser. That's only if the diagonal is not longer than 10 amos. Aval yesh balachson yoser mi eser. If the diagonal is more than 10 amos, they call ena maniacha lekeneged a katzer. Everyone would agree you only placed it on the short side. Why is he saying this? Because remember, that once you have an opening that is larger than 10 amos, it no longer works for a korah, right? We saw this all the way in the beginning. And therefore, he's pointing out that even though if on the, even if it's like straight, it's less than 10 amos. What's the word? I don't know. Like this way, whatever. What? Perpendicular, I guess you'd say, right? Yeah, okay, fine. Perpendicular. You'd say it would still be perpendicular to the walls. Yeah. If you would say that it's less than 10 amos, you may have thought it's okay because the opening is less than 10 amos, but he points out the whole function of a korah is to act as a wall. So once your korah is larger than 10, so if it's larger than 10 amos going on the diagonal, it would also be too long because the korah itself is acting as your opening. It's acting as closing your opening, and therefore it says if larger than 10 amos, it's no longer valid. Okay, fine. That's Rav Kahana's addition to the Kahana. He's just once again, it's the Kahana mix. Okay, says the Gemara on Ches Amud Beis 8b3. Ibailahu. The question was asked. We saw this already alluded to earlier. Are you allowed to carry directly under the Korah? Right? That's the first question. Am I allowed to say, so we know a Korah blocks off the space, right? Am I allowed to carry directly under it or not? So, Rav Chia, Rav Yochanan Amru, they say you're allowed to. Shmuel, Rav Shimon, Bar Rabbi, Rav Shimon ben Lakish Amru, they say it is forbidden to carry under the korah. Okay, so some say you're allowed to, some say you're not. What are they arguing about? Lema b'hakim ifilgi. Maybe they're arguing about the following: Demar savar korah mishum heker. The one who permits carrying under it holds that the function of a korah is a reminder. So even if I'm standing under it, I look up and there's a korah there, and then I say, "Oh, I can't go past this line." Makes sense. Umar savar korah mishum mechitza. The other one who says I can't carry under it holds it's because of a wall, that I treat the korah as a wall. And therefore, maybe the idea is that it's only from the beginning of the wall of the korah that the virtual wall is created, and that's why I can't carry past it, because the virtual wall only begins in the beginning of the korah. Therefore, if I went to go under it, I'm past the wall, and therefore I can't carry. The Gemara says, wait, who says that's machlokas? No, not necessarily. Maybe you could say, Tekuli al makor mishum heker. You could say everyone agrees that the function of a korah is a reminder. V'hacha bel hakim ifli. This is what they're arguing about. Demar savar hakero milagav. Some say that the reminder is specifically is for those inside the mavoi, and therefore you're only allowed to go up until the beginning of the korah. Okay, and some say the function of the reminder is to remind people on the outside of the mavoi, and therefore it's the other side of the korah, which is a reminder, which would therefore permit you to carry, to carry all the way, or even when you're under it, right? In other words, even when it comes to reminder, which part of the korah is serving to remind people? Is it people about to walk outside? Oh, I can't go further, or is it people outside looking in, saying, "Oh, I see people carrying. Because there's a korah here, that's why they're carrying," right? The point is, therefore, one would say it's the outside wall, the outside part of the korah, which is where the limits are. One would say it's the inside part, right? Even when it's a kera, you could, if it's a matter of reminding, it could still be the beginning or the end. By same, alternatively, you could say everyone agrees that it's about partitions. This is what we're arguing about. One authority, the one who forbids carrying out of the korah, holds that it's the korah's inner edge that is considered the partition. And the other one holds that it's the outer edge of the korah, which is seen as the partition. In other words,
why isn't there a third opinion that says both edges?
What would that mean, both edges?
Well, you can't carry from outside to inside. And
Okay.
go from inside to outside.
So therefore, yeah, well that's the same as saying, well, everyone would agree if you're on the outside, if you hold it to inner edge, everyone and you're coming from the outside, you would not be able to carry under it. So the one who says the inner edge would say exactly that. Okay.
Well, wait a second, because if it's a wall, if you're pretending that it's a wall.
Hey, you got to come at 6:20 ask questions. I'm just kidding.
If it's a wall, then you're essentially, it's almost like you're walking inside the wall.
Correct.
You walk inside a wall.
Well,
No, so I'm saying, in other words, if you're pretending it's a wall, it's a wall.
correct.
So whichever side you're on, it's that edge.
Right, so which would mean both edges.
Right.
Right.
But it doesn't matter to have this.
David and I
It doesn't. It does about something. What's it called? Again, if you're standing outside, it doesn't help you to have it as a wall on that side. In other words, I'm standing outside. It's a wall on the inside. I have to be inside of a mavoi, right? But if I have to be inside a partition to be able to carry. If I'm standing on the Rishus Harabim, how's it going to help me if there's a wall on both sides? It doesn't make it's meaningless if there's a wall on both sides. It's only going to make a difference to the person inside as to in terms of how far they can carry. I'm going to keep on rolling because we got to get this. Rav Chizda Kol Modim Bevein L'chaim. Everyone agrees that everyone, he says like this, everyone, even those who allow carrying under the Korah, when it comes to the lechi, the side opposite the lechi sha'aser, that it's forbidden. In other words, this machlokes is under the Korah, the top beam. But when it comes to the lechi, there you have machlokes. The lechi again is the side beam. By the lechi, everyone agrees you are not allowed to carry opposite it. Why is that? Because a Korah, as we haven't seen yet, a Korah by definition has to be at least a tefach, right? How long is a tefach? This or this, right? But the point is, right? So we know something. But the point is that a Korah is a little bit of a larger space. A lechi could be nothing, could be a twig, it could be very, very thin, it could be a paper thin. And so therefore, when it comes to being opposite the lechi, everyone's going to agree, even if you have a larger lechi, you can't carry opposite it because it gets too confusing. When it comes to the Korah, that's where we have this machlokas. Okay, we'll have to stop over here. Okay, have a great day.